hearing is now called back to order. We are in our round two. And so with that being said, I just want to start off with one question for the Board of Pensions.
Good afternoon, Council President. Francis Bielli, Board of Pensions, Executive Director.
How you doing this morning?
Good, thank you.
Good. My question is regarding diversity and inclusion for investment managers. And your testimony notes that the board seeks to promote diversity and inclusion in its investment manager selection process. And so I just want to know, what strategies do you use to promote this, and what is the current diversity rate of your investment managers?
So our current rate is diversity managers have managed approximately 55% of the board's assets, which is slightly over $4.2 billion. You could compare that to a handful of years ago when it was in the teens. The number of managers, diverse managers, is 28%. We do a utilization study every year which measures the number of diverse managers in the whole investment universe database that meet the minimum criteria to invest money for the board. That's 11.84%. So you can, it's a very small percentage in the investment world that are diverse investment managers. And what the board and the trustees have accomplished over the last several years is extremely impressive.
Are you able to break those numbers down based upon the demographics?
Yes, we can send that to you. We will
provide
have that, and we publish that every month in our flash report, which is on our website. And that, for example, at the board meeting tomorrow, that's in the materials at the board meeting. But we can send that to you, yes.
Thank you very much. Also, as noted in your testimony in the 5-year plan, since the 2016 pension reforms, the pension fund has increased its funding ratio from 44.8% to 61.9% and is expected to be fully funded by 2033. This has taken a collaboration across the city and state governments to make it happen, which I think is a great thing. Once fully funded, what impact will that have on our budget? Now, I know Rob touched on this briefly in our budget briefings, but we just want to go on the record. And then also, Rob, can you also compare the size of the payment the city makes now to the pension fund each year compared to what the payment will be in 2033?
Yeah. So getting to 100% funded will mean that the amount that we contribute to the pension fund will go down dramatically, because the biggest portion of our payment is paying off the unfunded liability from prior years. So that payment will go away when we're 100% funded, and our total payment in 33 would go from $768 million to $147 million, and that is an all funds number. But as you can see, it's a giant impact on our budget. It frees up a lot of funds. Our decision making at that point will be a lot different from what it is now.
Good job investment-wise, appreciate it. Also, I want to ask for the city treasurer to please come on up.
Good afternoon, Council President. Jackie Dunn, City Treasurer.
And good afternoon. I want to talk a little bit about NPI, the Neighborhood Preservation Initiative. It's now in its third year of a 4-year program. As we plan for the future of this important program, does the administration recommend another bond issuance versus using general fund dollars, or an infusion of both to continue to build upon the work related for NPI?
Thank you, Council President. This body several years ago approved an authorization for a total of $400 million borrowings over several years to support the programs underneath the Neighborhood Preservation Initiative. As mentioned earlier to one of your colleagues, we've done 2 of those $100 million borrowings, and we're working with the NPI team on what their upcoming cash forecast needs look like to see where that pace of spend is, to see when we want to time that third borrowing.
Yeah, and Rob, could you also just clarify also for the record, now I know we spent 200, there's 150 under discussion. I just want to make claim that 150 before the administration begin planning, and then technically there's 50 left, but could you just clarify it for me?
So the amount spent, I think the treasurer said this morning is 110 million. So of the 200 million that's been borrowed, there's 90 million left to be spent. Of the 200 million that's not borrowed yet, there's been an NPI budget approved by council that was for 150 million.
150 million. I just wanted to clarify that because I know some district members, not even just district members in general, has had questions about it. And also, based upon that last 50, we have to determine as a group, administration and council, if we decide to do more borrowing or figure out a strategy on how we want to move forward. Is that correct?
That's right, how to go forward once we get to that point.
Okay. Part of MPI, and I think this is very good information, I know we're addressing affordable workforce housing, we're addressing the tree removal, the alleyways, we're also addressing the issue of driveways repairs as well. All are key, critically important issues throughout the city of Philadelphia. One particular area that significantly has an impact on our MPI funds are the support for basic systems repair as well as restore, repair, and renew, right? And so on the first MPI bond issuance of 100 million, eliminate that backlog. And so just want to give an idea, if you can give me an idea and an update on this bond and what the payback outlook looks like.
I'm sorry, Council President, could you repeat the last part of your question?
Can you give us an update on the $100 million bond that we used and the payback and the outlook on that particular bond, what that looks like?
You mean the debt service on the
Yeah,
bond?
debt service on it, yes, the 100 million.
Sure. So on the first part of your question regarding the program allocations, the basic systems repair program through the first two bonds was allocated around 40 million. Adaptive modification received approximately 8 million, and that's also a program administered by Philadelphia Housing and Development Corporation. Those programs spend quite quickly. As you mentioned, they have a lot of need, and they receive not only NPI dollars, but also funding from other state sources, which is helpful. But those programs are the two quickest that we see requisitions for. And then in terms of the debt service, so the debt service on the first two borrowings to date is projected to be approximately 15.2 million in fiscal year 25. Because those were borrowed through our service agreement structure, those are paid through the class 200 line item in the city budget. So that's more unique relative to class 700 debt service payments. And then we anticipate that when all 400 million in bonds are issued for the NPI program, the annual debt service is projected to be approximately 33.7 million annually.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And also thank you for the work that you're doing around MPI and working with the team as we draw down the funds to move forward to address a variety of those different issues. So
thank you. They do all the hard work, so we appreciate that.
Thank you for that. At this time, the chair recognizes Councilman Curtis Jones.
Thank you, Mr. President. Very quickly, my colleague asked how we could further market some of the programs available dealing with real estate and seniors and abatements. Can you tell me if we are connected and included in Benephilly?
Yeah, Revenue would like to get back to you on that.
Okay, that's an important way to codify everything that people are eligible for in one application. So I think it would behoove us as a city to take advantage of it and get it marketed a bit better and boots on the ground. And one of the things Anton Moore does in South Philly is go door to door, and he knocks on the door and says, "How can I help you?" Which I think is novel. And I am going to get some of that, Mr. President, because I think it's the best way to demonstrate to taxpayers that we're here to help with bringing relief door to door. I think it's laudable. The other thing is Vicki Riley. You need to convince her to come out of retirement because she is one of the few people that could go to a community meeting and have people clapping about taxes, like and wanting to pay their taxes. So whatever you have to do to incentivize her to come out, I would suggest. Do you have an answer?
Thank you. I appreciate that question. And the information on Benefitly, I'm not familiar with partnering with them, revenue partnering with them to date. So I would certainly welcome any opportunity to partner with any organization that can help get the word out.
Yeah, it's not just you but particularly you. When somebody takes the time to fill out one of those long forms, applications, it is efficient if they find out everything that they're eligible for. And it's been said, Councilman Dom used to always tell us we leave about $11,000 per household on the table in low-income neighborhoods that we could be taking advantage of. And so if you could get to the president a confirmation about that, and if we're not on it, how we can incorporate that, I think that would be helpful. Then finally, I want to say thank you. Because when you do something wrong, we tell you about it. But when you do something right, we should tell you about it. And in this case, maybe 6 budget cycles ago, we had a complaint from a senior citizen that came in to our office. And she was one of those seniors that still paid by check, still put the stamps on the envelope, took the envelope to the post office to make sure her money was paid. And she did it religiously, which is something to be appreciated. But what she came to the office and said is, when I put $30 on this, my balance doesn't come down? And when we looked at it, it was because it was applied to principal and interest. And there was no breakdown on the actual receipt as to what your dollars were being applied to. Well, we checked before the hearing, and you guys have done that, and then some. It's in most revenue packets, it breaks it down. This money, this dollar is going towards interest. This dollar is going towards penalty, or this dollar is applied in part to the principal. I think for seniors and those who are not necessarily seniors, that is accountability at its best. And I just wanted to, on the record, thank you guys for at least hearing us. So I say this to my colleagues, they actually do listen, and they actually do take heed to what we are saying as elected officials. So thank you.
Thank you,
Rob.
Councilman. That was a great suggestion, and we were happy to implement that. While we're talking about assistance programs, I also just wanted to mention, we distributed some information, but I just wanted to make sure everyone is also aware of the Pennsylvania Housing Assistance Fund that's available right now. Applications just reopened on March 18th, and there's between $40 and $50 million that's available to Pennsylvanians. That's for people who experience financial trouble during the pandemic, and that applies to mortgage payments, property taxes and fees, and also utilities. So I'd just like to get the word out about that also.
Thank you, Mr. President.
You're welcome. The chair recognizes Councilwoman Catherine Gilmore Richardson.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. President. Thank you again, Rob. I just want to circle back to a couple of questions that I had, and then I'll have some questions for the treasurer's office.
And then I have a update to an answer that I wasn't able to give before. So whenever you want me to do that, I can do that.
Okay,
So-
great. Okay, that's excellent. First, if you could just talk about the economic stimulus funds. In the budget in brief, there's a projected $11.3 million increase in the economic stimulus fund from FY24 to FY25. And that makes the total for FY25 $29.3 million. And so can you just explain the significant increase in the contribution to the fund? And if you could just talk about what you all are thinking about is like a strategic plan to spend the funds on initiatives that grow and support minority business owners.
Yeah, and I think that's probably best answered by Commerce.
Okay.
Because the money runs really through Commerce. And I think it's about 16 million a year for the rest of the plan. So I think they'll be well prepared to talk through how they view using that.
Right, but it's just such a significant increase over typical. And so I'll circle back to Commerce. I just made a note to circle back to Commerce on that. The CCP subsidy. And so if you could just, for the record, what was the actual contribution to CCP for FY23?
23?
For FY23?
I think it was 50 million. Is that?
Well, for 23?
Actually,
I just want to make sure it was,
give me a second. I actually,
Okay.
instead of guessing, I should actually look at.
I think you're talking about FY25, because that's 51 million.
Yeah, so FY23 was 67.
Right.
And part of that was, which I think is going to be your next question, we gave them an additional 15 million in 23 for their capital budget. And that was intended to cover 3 years of capital costs for them. So it was a one-time thing that didn't need to recur because it was helping them with capital.
Understood. Okay, so FY23 was 67 because of the capital needs. FY25 proposed is 51.
Yeah.
Right? And in the FY24 year-end transfer ordinance, you're proposing the $10 million increase for CCP, and that would bring them up this year to 61 million?
Correct.
Okay, and I guess the justification for that is the additional contribution to offset the tuition increase?
So partly the tuition increase and partly to establish the municipal college for city employment.
Okay, and so then do you believe CCP would be able to stave off a tuition increase in FY25 so that they can run this new program with the $10 million decrease in the FY?
Yes, yes.
Yes?
Yes, that's, yes.
Okay. My colleague asked a question about indemnities and refunds, but if you could just go over it for me. For FY23, our indemnities cost $10.7 million.
Yeah, so here's the kind of quirk there, is that at the end of the fiscal year, indemnities costs are then, in our financial statements, are then allocated out to departments.
Okay.
So what we'll show is the actual in the finance indemnities isn't the full indemnities. So to answer the question of what we spent in indemnities for 23, what we would have to do is go back and kind of go department by department and then get back to.
Okay, because to me, from the budget in brief, it looks like FY23 is 10.7 million, but FY24 projected 74.2 million, and then FY25 then would be a decrease of $13 million in contributions to the fund.
Yeah, and so again, the change from 23 to 24 is distorted by having allocated the indemnities costs out to departments.
Out to the
Yes.
Okay. Okay. All right, and then really quickly on insurance. In your budget detail, Rob, it shows that in FY24, we paid $859,084 for cybersecurity liability insurance, and $3,350,491 for for terrorism liability insurance. There are no allocations that I can see or find for FY25 for those costs, and so could you just share the terms of the policies?
Yeah, if you look at the bottom of that page, you'll see there's a big 4-point-something million that's to cover all the insurance.
Right.
So we don't know how exactly it'll be allocated between the two, but that funding will come out of that pot.
Oh, okay, so it'll come out of, at the bottom
Yeah,
of the
yeah,
page, and then
that's
you'll
right.
allocate it out. I was just concerned because we're having so many events coming up.
Correct, yeah, it's not
Okay.
going away, it's just, those two are bundled together on that page.
Understood. I heard the bell. I'll come back on the next round. Okay. Thank you, Mr. President.
You're welcome. Councilman Nick,
Do you want me to give you the information? Yes. So the two facilities that were included were the MEU, Medical Examiner's Unit, and 500 South Broad. Those are the two that we thought we were going to sell that will take a little while longer to sell. And then the other part was why the zoning permit number went up so much in '24. If you remember when the abatement law changed, there was the abatement law changed, and there was a rush to get permits, so that inflated the number, and that's why it goes back
And
down.
that's why it goes down again?
Yes.
Because it was a rush to put in all of those applications?
Yes.
Okay. So 600 South Broad.
500.
500 South Broad. And then,
The medical examiner's unit.
over where air management used to be in University City?
Yes.
Over there?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Okay. All right. I'll come back on the next round. Thank you.
you're welcome. Councilmember O'Rourke.
Thank you, Council President. I wanted to follow up on my previous questions to try to get a little bit more detail. I know a number of folks have also lifted up similar questions regarding auto enrollment and tax exemption and refund programs. As far as I understand, I can also, I'm sorry. You're coming up, okay, sorry. As far as I understand, Philadelphians are eligible for the low-income wage tax refund if they're eligible for the Commonwealth Special Tax Forgiveness Credit. I know we've talked a little bit about this earlier, but have you actually engaged the Commonwealth around sharing the data, even with the legal pieces, sharing this data to make the low-wage income tax refund enrollment process easier for Philadelphians? Has there actually been talk about that?
Thank you for the question. We are always exploring how we can make it easier. I can revisit the topic with my team to see when it was that we last talked with them about that data sharing. I do believe the challenge is that by the time the data is available to us, it's no longer current. So much of the data that we receive in our dating share agreements are 2 years old when we get it. So that's a part of the challenge, but I'm happy to revisit that and see if there's any changes that could improve that process.
Stay focused. Do you have any estimate of the number of Philadelphians who are eligible for the low-income wage tax refund and not receiving it right now?
Right now I have the number of folks who applied, but I do not have the number who are eligible, so I think we can analyze that and get back to you on it.
Okay. And I understand that there are legal and data issues, as has been explained to me today, which is helpful to know, that ultimately make it difficult to automatically enroll Philadelphians in all of these programs. And I appreciate how much of a priority this is for you all as well. Thank you for getting back to your team as well. But when low-income Philadelphians aren't getting the crucial savings that they need, we are failing them, and we really want to make sure that folks have access to what they need. So sort of in concert with all of my colleagues who have been interested in this issue, can I ask for a commitment from Revenue that you'll work with the council to do everything that you can to automate these programs, homestead, loop, senior tax freeze, low-income wage tax refund, et cetera, so that we can get 100% enrollment for Philadelphians?
I can commit that we will work very closely with you, within the legal boundaries that we have, and also, provided that we have the tools and resources that are needed to do, something like that. Because as I said earlier, we do share the same goal.
Yeah.
So I'm happy to, have new conversations about how we could potentially expand our assistance programs.
Okay, thank you. I also wanted to follow up on Revenue's efforts to identify landlords with multiple property delinquencies. How will this administration coordinate data and efforts between Revenue and other agencies like L&I to identify predatory landlords with multiple tax delinquencies and code violations, and then hold them accountable to their tenants and taxpayers?
I'm going to ask Francis Beckley, our Chief Counsel, to come up and speak to that.
Yes, ma'am, thank you.
Thank you.
So we do work closely with code enforcement to identify cases where we will, as I described, sue landlords for everything that is what we call a municipal claim, which means it's been liened. So that will be the real estate tax, the water, and any work that L&I has done on the property. And that has been quite successful.
Okay, thank you.
And the new PRISM system, Philadelphia Tax Center, is enabling us to have much better information
Okay,
with which to do that.
thank you. Lastly, I wanted to follow up again on the city's budget engagement process. Rob, you mentioned that the engagement strategy, and thank you for your responses. You mentioned that the engagement strategy is currently under development now, but the budget is being crafted now. I'm worried that if a strategy isn't finalized soon, community members won't be able to participate this spring in time for council to consider their input. Can the budget office be clear about when the engagement strategy will be finalized? I know that you said you're in the early stages, but when will you have a plan?
Okay, we will get back to you on that.
Okay. Is this budget office, in your thinking at all, for whatever's been talked about, still committed to compensating residents for their time and participation in the budget engagement sessions when these reconvene?
Yes.
Okay. I want to shift now to the Board of Pensions. I understand the dire importance of strategically investing our pension fund so it is healthy and hopefully soon fully funded. I also understand that the Board of Pensions has worked hard for a long time to fund and stabilize our pension fund, and I want to applaud all of those tremendous efforts. However, I think we would all agree that a healthy pension fund should not come at the expense of our values. And in fact, the City Council has worked with the Board of Pensions at least 3 times, as I understand it, to direct our investments in ways that hold to our values. 2013, the board adopted the Sandy Hook principles to condition their investments in gun and ammunition manufacturers. In 21, the board divested from private prisons. In 22, the board divested from Russia and Russia-related institutions. That said, as far as I understand, the Board of Pensions provides little transparency around its specific investments because the pension is invested in outside managed funds that are changing constantly. This is concerning to us, and I am curious as to what efforts are being made to ensure that our pension fund is not invested in other ways that do not align with our values, or in some cases in ways that directly oppose the work that we're doing in the city, like investing in the climate change accelerating fossil fuel industry, gun and other weapons manufacturing folks, corporations actively union busting here in Philly, war bonds and foreign armies. Can you speak to that?
I can speak to, thanks for the question, I can speak to all the things that you mentioned earlier, such as private prisons, guns, so on and so forth, that we have a database where we run our entire portfolio through that database to identify any specific investment that would violate any of those prohibitions. So for example, if we're invested in an S&P 500 fund, I'm going to say it might be the S&P 490 fund, right? Because there's 10 stocks that are eliminated either because of the Sandy Hook principles or Iran or other prohibitions. Concerning fossil fuels, we work closely with Councilperson Gilmore Richardson on an ESG resolution, and she insisted, I won't use the word insisted because the charter empowers the board to do the investments, but we worked together with all of the council to pass a resolution unanimously to incorporate the ESG principles that Council Gilmore Richardson and us worked together to draft into our investment policy statement. So the board does take all of those into consideration in every investment decision they make. I will comment on what you said about transparency. This board is more transparent than any other public pension fund in the country. Our investments go on our website every month. Our board meeting is public board meeting. In fact, it takes place tomorrow. You're invited to come over and watch. Every single investment is discussed and reviewed at every single pension board meeting. So I actually object to your statement that we are not transparent concerning our investments. We are extremely transparent.
Your objection is noted. I would like to come back around for the second round. Thank you.
The chair recognizes Catherine Gilmore Richardson.
Quick point of
Councilmember.
information based on the information that was shared, Councilmember Jones. I just wanted to thank Councilmember O'Rourke for his question. We did work together, and I'm really thankful to the Pension Board regarding the climate risk disclosure. And I don't know if you recall the private prisons resolution as well. That was years ago when I was still a staffer for former Councilmember Blondell Reynolds Brown. So we have worked with you all on both of those issues, and I just wanted to say thank you for the question and for the work that the Pension Board is doing to ensure that our investments line up properly.
Yeah, you're welcome. And it's very important to the trustees to try to ensure transparency. So if there's anything you think we're not being transparent about, please let us know, and we will try to increase that. So it's very important to the trustees.
Thank you very much, and I'm sure we haven't invested in Truth Social, correct? Hopefully not. So some of you will catch that later on. And so everything in. I just had to provide just one piece of information. One, I know that Councilman O'Rourke talked about a couple of times the budget engagement process in the community, and so as the administration figure out what that looks like, because as you mentioned, it would be held off indefinitely until they figure out when you will resort to engaging the community. But have no fear, City Council is here. We're starting our first budget hearing at South Philadelphia High School with Councilman Mark Squilla, and then I have one on the 29th with Councilman Jamie Gaudier, and so we continue. We sent out a request for collaboration with members about a week ago, so we can go on the road and make sure the community have a say-so on what we're doing. And so I just wanted to update you on that process, and as the administration move forward their process, but we're already on top of it, and so I'll give you an update as we move forward. All right. At this particular time, I want to acknowledge Councilmember Jeffrey J. Young.
Thank you, Mr. President. For finance, just a couple of questions about your systems and data. Can you tell us how well does our current systems integrate with other systems, other municipal systems that we have, and if there are any compatibility issues that hinder data sharing or reporting?
So I can speak to our finance. So Opal is the project that will replace our current financial and purchasing system. So I can focus on that in the response. There is some integration between the systems currently. So there is information that flows from our professional services contracting system. Those are the opportunities that have to be RFP'd. It's called ACES. It does set up encumbrances, essentially the budgetary amount for that contract within our financial system called FAMOUS, and expenditures flow back. In addition, AdPix, which is where the bids that have to be competitively, or the lowest responsible bids that procurement does, is in AdPix, as well as any of the purchase orders. That is very tightly coupled with our general ledger system, so it sets up encumbrances as well between those two systems. And PHL contracts is to a certain extent, probably less, I think, but integrated to a certain extent. There's a lot of integrations, though, that doesn't happen right now that we hope to be able to do in the new system, and that we know that we'll be able to do in the new system. So one of the biggest gains will be the submitting of the invoices up front, right, like I talked about earlier. In addition, there's some front-end processes of approving various things related to reconciliations or adjustments in payments that happen outside of the system through memos or emails, and also with grant funding as well, that will all be captured in the new system.
Thank you. And I asked that because we've been getting inquiries from our NACs in our districts, and basically saying that, because of some issue with finance, they're not getting funded from the Department of Community Development, or whatever department the NACs are under. So it's taken them essentially it's like months to expedite, to get their invoice and payments to the next. So there are smallest organizations on the ground that are dealing with the everyday issues of people, and I'm just trying to figure out what we can do to expedite the money that is allocated for our NAC programs.
Okay. If you can send me the details, I can follow up on that and figure out what's holding up the payment and see if we can speed it up.
Thank you. Another question, what are the key performance metrics for our current data systems, and how do they meet our operational needs?
So I don't know if we have like metrics directly tied to the financial and procurement systems about the performance. We do have, for our HCM, our Human Capital Management System, we do have performance management, or performance metrics on how that is performing from a perspective of, how quickly are we able to enhance the system and how many defects are we resolving. For our other financial systems, there's various, within the departments, right, or within budgets, there's various performance metrics around contracting or payments, right, and they are, proxies, I guess you could say, for the systems, right? Because the systems are here to support our business processes, and our business processes are about getting contracts conformed and in place so we can do our purchasing and paying our vendors, right, at a core, and producing our financial statements, right? So there's performance metrics tied to those business processes, but both within finances department as well as procurement's department and CAO's department. But they're not, that's how we measure the performance of the system. How well are we able to perform our business process that the system supports?
Thanks. I mean, I asked because if we have a performance-based budgeting system, then I think every dollar that is allocated to some government function should have performance measures associated with it. So that's why, I asked that question.
You'll see as you look at the budget detail that departments are broken down by program, and each program has measures. So they'll be there.
Thank you. One more question for this round. How do we ensure the accuracy and reliability of the data within our systems? One thing that happens, one issue we've gotten is that the Revenue Department has kind of missed payments from people, right? Or they say they've been applying payments, they've misapplied payments, I'll say. And so how can we assure that, that data is accurate?
Thank you, Councilman. Most recently, we did hear about a system issue that caused some payments to be applied to a future period as if it was an estimated payment. And once we heard that, we were able to identify those accounts and make the adjustments to those accounts. I'm not sure if that's the specific scenario that you're referencing. We also have, circumstances where someone may send us a check, excuse me, without a specific payment voucher, and the information that they provide us isn't detailed enough for us to fully understand where they want that applied. So we'll apply it, based on whatever information that we have available. It may just be the owner name, property address. It could even be as little as the PO box that they directed it to. And we will apply that payment. And then later on, if we learn that that payment was misapplied after asking for a proof of payment, we will make sure that we move it to the right account. But I think that probably the former issue that I mentioned is what has come up.
Yes,
yeah. And that is now corrected in our system.
Thank you. Yeah, we had a senior call us, who received a letter, said she had a $2,500 credit on her account, and as she was inquiring about it, she was told that someone made a $4,000 payment on her account, which means some payments were applied to the future rather than to her past payment agreement that she was on. So just want to make sure that issue gets cleared up. And thank you for
we received that feedback through our customer service team and understood that it was an issue and quickly identified it and corrected it.
Sorry, and one last question I have on this round. We get a lot of calls about just the customer service aspect of revenue and how it is very difficult to get someone on the phone to discuss their issues. We have a lot of seniors in our district, so coming downtown, that's not possible, not feasible. There are no more like mini city halls in North Philly for them to go to, so using the telephone rather than an online system is much more convenient for those folks. And so how can we ensure that those residents feel like that their government is being responsive to their needs by answering no questions via phone?
So we certainly would like to be able to respond to customers in our call center faster than we have been able to recently, and we don't want them to have to come downtown or to any satellite office. The challenges that we've faced has been short staffing, but we're working very hard with OHR to address that issue. We're just onboarding over 40 employees that will help us bolster the staff in that area. We created a new onboarding training program to make sure that that was implemented last fall, to make sure that our staff are as prepared as possible to provide the best customer service to taxpayers. We constantly realign resources as we're able to based on volume and the area of contact. So for example, if we have longer wait times in our call center, we may be able to reallocate staff from our email unit or another unit. So we're constantly doing what we can to reduce the amount of wait time, and we implemented a new call center about 2 years ago that allows us to give customers the option to request a return call so that they don't have to wait on hold. So I think that now that we're hiring this cohort of staff, that will help us close the gap in the long wait times.
Thank you, Mr. President.
You're welcome. The chair recognizes Councilman Jim Harity.
Thank you, Council President. I only have really one question for the pension board. What is the percentage of city workers who do contribute to the deferred compensation, and how can we encourage more of the city workforce to contribute?
Thank you for that question, Councilman. We have an excellent deferred compensation plan, and recently we gave a couple of seminars to the new employees in the mayor's office, and we had people on the spot signing up for deferred comp. We have our representative from Nationwide here today, Brad Nice. I'll ask Brad to come up here. But concerning deferred comp, we have currently over 25,000 participants in the deferred compensation plan, 19,737 active participants who are contributing. Some people leave their money in there and stop contributing from time to time. We recently approached approximately $2 billion in the deferred compensation plan. Nationwide does seminars. They go to the airport, different shifts. They go to the various police districts, various different shifts. So they're giving presentations around the clock in order to try to encourage people to participate in deferred compensation, especially newer employees who may not be in some of the older pension plans. They know how important it is to have that additional contribution piece of their retirement. So that's how many people, over 23,000. And Brad, you have some historical comparison for that, don't you?
I do. Thank you, Fran. Brad Nice, Program Director for the city's Deferred Comp Plan. Thank you, Council Member, for the question. I started working with the city's Deferred Comp Plan back in 2006, and there was approximately $420 million in assets at the time and approximately 13,000 members. So the growth that has come with the plan, up over 25,000 and approaching $2 billion, has been really impressive over that time. A direct, effect of the board, their support in promoting the plan, as well as the pension staff. As a matter of fact, I just got done putting together our annual review for calendar year 2023, and 2023 we conducted over 350 seminars around the city with over 8,000 attendees of city employees that attended those educational workshops.
Thank you.
And Councilman, I'll also add, just as a side note, the Philadelphia Parking Authority, who are members of our pension plan, but were previously had their own deferred compensation plan, asked to join our plan because the fees in our plan were considerably lower than what they were being charged. So we've had, what, Brad, approximately 1,400 people or so from the Parking Authority come to our plan?
Parking, it's a little, just over 500.
500, so they all came to our plan, and they're paying fees that are probably 25% of what they were paying in their deferred compensation provider with the Parking Authority.
Nice, okay, thank you. Thank you, Council President.
You're welcome, Councilman Harity. The chair recognizes Councilmember Nina Ahmad.
Thank you, Council President. I do have questions about the pension board.
Could you
first-
do this? Chairwoman? Just for all the members?
Yeah.
Please
thank
speak
you.
into the microphone so our tech guy won't come out here and make like a loud presentation again. So I want to make sure everybody's speaking to the microphone because we have a court reporter and he needs to also be able to document all the information coming in. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, first I want to commend you on this amazing healthiness of our pension fund. And I wanted to really hear from you what reforms did you what reforms took place that you all mandated to result in this? And then I have some follow-up questions.
So, sure, thank you for that question. So the 26, what we commonly refer to as the 2016 pension reforms included a hybrid pension plan for new municipal employees, not uniform employees, but municipal employees. So it was a hybrid pension plan, which was the old Plan Y up until the $65,000 salary, and then a deferred compensation piece, deferred contribution piece on top of that, where the city would do a match of what the person contributed up to 1.5% of the person's annual compensation. So it was a hybrid defined benefit, defined contribution plan. In addition, there were some additional employee contributions by the uniformed officers who were not subject to Plan 16, and a tiered additional contribution by municipal employees based on salary. So someone who has a higher salary would pay a higher tiered contribution. There was also the revenue recognition policy, which was instituted, which there was a piece of the sales tax. There was an additional 1% city sales tax. And this is where council worked in coordination with the state legislature and with the pension board in order to give a portion of that additional sales tax dedicated to the pension fund. So for example, last fiscal year, that resulted in $92 million to the pension fund. The additional employee contributions were a little over $29 million to the pension fund. That additional revenue does not act to reduce the city's annual contribution under the state law, but it's in addition to that and is also earmarked to paying down the unfunded actuarial liability. So since 2016, the net pension liability has been reduced by a little over $1.6 billion. So you're attacking what was a problem on both ends. During that same period of time, as a result of reducing the unfunded actuarial liability in that aggressive manner, the funding ratio has increased over 17.1%. And you can see the State Auditor General, City Council actually passed a resolution commending the pension fund for their work in that area, but really it's a joint effort. And it was a joint effort in how government can work. You know, working with City Council, working with the pension board, working with the state legislature, and working with the various mayoral administrations. So it's really a testament to collaboration, not the least of which is the municipal unions, right? They had to agree to this in negotiations also. But everyone understood that it was for the the well-being of the pension fund and the future well-being of city employees and their families.
That's commendable. So I wanted to see that you wrote in your testimony there was a fee reduction on part of the managers that resulted in $90 million. So are the managers, are they pegged to a performance, or there's a, regardless of performance, they get their?
In essence, it's performance, so it's a percentage of their assets under management. So about 60% of our portfolio is index funds. So they're literally pennies on the dollar are the fees. And that's how, starting in 2016, we aggressively started, well, we're out of hedge funds except for one manager who is a very good manager. It's actually an African-American male-owned manager who does a very good job. But aside from that, we divested from hedge funds. We found that the fees were too high and the returns were extremely low. So we divested from hedge funds, and we will pay for an active manager whose fees are higher than an index fund if we know that we'll get the additional alpha or the additional performance out of that manager in order to warrant those fees. However, as I said, we're 60% index, so yeah, our fund ratio fee percentage went from 0.64% to the current 0.30%, which resulted in a savings of over $90 million, again, during that short period of time.
That's a great addition. Yeah.
Performance every month,
Yeah.
as Fran was talking about before, and see how our managers are doing versus what we would expect them to do.
Right.
And if they don't perform, then we take appropriate action.
Quick follow-up is about asset allocation, and in our Philadelphia, are there opportunities here that you have invested in, or what does your portfolio look like in terms of?
There are some managers who are local, and
Not managers, I mean your actual allocation in funds, are they generating out of Philadelphia? Are they local investments you make?
So all of our funds are invested through investment managers. And some of the investment managers, yes, are local investment managers located in Philadelphia, yes.
And do they invest in things that are in Philadelphia, meaning not the managers themselves, but say it's your alternative as real estate portfolio?
Some of them do have some investments in Philadelphia, but again, we hire them for their expertise and we don't dictate where they invest, yeah.
So would it be possible to see if it is profitable to do this, we invest in local, assets?
Yeah, we're always happy to look at and do due diligence and consider any proposal.
But that circulates our money, which is why I'm asking
No, I
about
get it, yeah.
Philadelphia investments.
Yeah, no, it's a really good question, and it's a good point. And we are always happy to sit down with anyone who has a proposal. There are certain things we require for a proposal for us to do due diligence. So if someone comes to us with a concept that's not necessarily something that's ready for us to examine, we do need concrete information in order for us to review that. And yes, we are always glad to review any proposal that's presented to us.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President.
You're welcome. The chair recognizes Councilwoman Catherine Gilmore Richardson.
Thank you, Mr. President. That was quick. Well, while you're there, I just want to say thank you, Fran. Thank you to you and to your team for all of your work over the last term. I know we worked together on a few resolutions that the board did take into consideration and passed. And so I want to say thank you. But also, when I was Councilwoman Blondell Reynolds Brown's legislative aide and we worked on the private prisons resolution, I will say that I got the best education, I have to say her name, from Carol Stooks Baylor. She quickly got me together when we were trying to pass that resolution and showed me the right way to approach the board and get it done. So I have to shout out Carol because I know she's listening. But I wanted to say thank you all so much. And to Brad, who's here from Nationwide, we have Brad every year at our staff retreat in the summer where it is not an option, it is mandatory for all of my team members to sign up for our deferred compensation plan. So I just wanted to say thank you to both of you for all of your work, and Brad particularly for joining us in the summers for our staff retreat and helping my team in particular. I quickly wanted to go back to Project Opal. I know my colleague, Councilmember Young, talked about Project Opal for some time, and I just wanted to get a couple questions on the record regarding the sort of change in migration to Project Opal. You all know that many times I have discussed the Office of Homeless Services relative to their overspending over the last few fiscal years. So if you could just talk to us specifically about how Project Opal will allow for better financial oversight for departments, because I think part of the concern initially was that this was able to get through so many levels of government. And so if you could talk about the financial oversight that Project Opal will allow departments to have, and then how is the Finance Department reviewing all of the practices in the interim to ensure that other departments are not using similar financial practices to avoid our safeguards and overspend?
Yeah, I think at a big picture level, yes, we believe that we're going to have tighter, or the ability to more easily provide internal controls for our contracting and our payment process in the new system. It's hard for me to say specifically how right now because we haven't completed our design phase. We're going through design now, and we should be wrapping it up. I think the current schedule has us wrapping it up in the fall.
That will be one of our priorities.
Yes, but that is the internal controls aspects and the tools it's going to give us to make sure that we have strong internal controls and we can monitor them are definitely going to be better in the new system than they are now. And I think we can probably follow up more specifically in the fall with the details.
Okay, so that phase of the project will be in the fall. If you could just submit to us the actual timeline for the full implementation of Project Opal, I think that'll be helpful for us to understand. But I wanted to get that on the record because as you all are designing, and I know we don't have the results of the audit and we won't have that for quite some time in the OIG's report, but I also would like for you all to look at those two items when they are available, if they could help towards a better design of this system, okay? Because we know the old system, Famous and ACEs, they're old. And so if we could just get as much information as possible in this Project Opal to safeguard the city and other departments from this level of overspending, that will be exceedingly helpful. Okay, I just wanted to get that on the record. Really quick for revenue, I wanted to mention something regarding the LOOP program. I know my colleagues have mentioned this, but we had worked with revenue about a year or so ago, if I'm remembering correctly, regarding the regulations for LOOP and individuals and constituents that can prove equitable ownership. And this is specifically around folks who are struggling with a tangled title or deed in the city. If they could prove equitable ownership, then they too would be eligible to apply for LOOP. And so I just wanted to mention those regulation updates and see if anyone had an update regarding that and if it's working.
Good afternoon, Councilmember.
Good afternoon.
So currently, we have a project to update all of the regulations officially. However, the policy is that we do accept tangled titles.
Right, as long as the individual can prove equitable ownership in the property, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and when the regulation is updated, if you could send that to council for our review, that would be helpful. And I heard the bell, I'll come back on the next round for the city treasurer's office, but I too wanted to add my thanks and gratitude to Vicki Riley. We miss her. She went with us every Sunday prior to the pandemic, and then after we were back in person to different religious institutions across the city of Philadelphia every Sunday, where we shared revenue information when folks were leaving service. And she was just always so bubbly and gregarious and just warm, and people love working with Vicki, and she was able to help so many people, and so we miss her. I know where she is, and I already gave her recommendations, and we did lift her up prior to her departure, but I too wanted to say and offer gratitude to Vicki Riley and also Michelle, who's now at Water, who went with us every single week, so thank you.
Thank you. We miss them as well.
Councilwoman, this will be our last round because we're starting public comment at 3 o'clock.
Okay. I'm up?
A quick one,
Oh, yes, thank you
real
so
quick
much, Council
because
President.
we won't have a third round after this, so we'll go straight into public comment.
Yes, well, thank you so much for the leeway, Council President, and I will be quick. I just have a few questions. One regarding unclaimed property from the Treasurer's Office. For the record, if you could just provide us with an update on the city's unclaimed property as required by the legislation that I passed last term.
Yes, thank you, Council Member and Finance Chair. From 2022 and 2023, our office was able to claim a total of approximately $13 million that was due back to the city to various departments.
Excellent.
We are in the process of preparing for the report that would be due for this fiscal year in August. The good news is that the city seems to be generally caught up. It looks like there's only around $200,000 due to the city at the state unclaimed property fund. We will check again later this spring because the reporting deadline to remit funds to the state is April 15th. And so if there's anything that we're able to capture later this spring, we will do that as well.
Okay, that'll be great. I just want to put on the record, and I will share this with them when they come before us. And well, we're actually sharing it now, but I'll go over this when they come before us. The School District of Philadelphia has a ton of claims with the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania that I think need to be addressed. And so we will share that information. It was just brought to my attention when we were looking, preparing for this hearing. And so we will let them know, but I just wanted to put it on the record that the district has a ton, about 9 pages of claims that need to be brought back to the School District of Philadelphia. And then finally, I was reviewing your testimony, and you talked about how you all are planning to host an investor conference in 2024. So how will we be using this as an opportunity to diversify our contracting and our investment managers? And how will we be advertising the opportunity to firms that are owned by people of color?
Sure. Thank you for the question. Periodically, the city since 2015, has hosted an investors conference to welcome firms and also retail investors who might be interested in purchasing the city's bonds to come learn more about the city and our credits, upcoming debt issuances, and hear general updates and take tours to learn more about the city's economy and significant economic development projects going on around the city. We've found this to be a good opportunity to showcase, significant policy initiatives that the city's undertaking, as well as to try and drum up demand in advance of one of our credits, like the airport or the water department, coming to market shortly following the conference. And so we think that's, a great way to get the word out there. The Free Library has generously allowed us to use their space, but we do solicit bids for vendors that support the conference in terms of, for example, for the tours, we try and rent trolleys to take investors around the city, and so we will solicit bids to work with local companies who might be able to support those efforts.
I see. Okay, and I heard the bell, and I will respect the time, and thank you, Council President. I just want to put this on the record for this hearing, particularly for the Treasurer's Office, and we will submit the balance of the questions in writing, but what is the local minority participation for our bond deals? And this is under proactive credit and debt management. Have the teams been selected? What's the process? For banking and investment management, and I'm just going through the, reading through the presentation basically. How much money do we currently have in investments? Of those dollars, how much is minority spend? And I'll go through water and waste revenue bonds as well. Who are some of the firms that you use? Have any firms been chosen? And then I'll submit the questions regarding refunding, providing opportunities for savings. I mentioned that yesterday, but we don't have time. So I just wanted to put that on the record because I do believe we need to add diversity there.
Sure, absolutely. Sure, I'll do a quick response, and we're also happy to follow up with more detail in writing. On the underwriting side of the house, my predecessor, Treasurer Johnson, really did a nice job of making sure the city has diverse underwriting pools that we can call from when we bring transactions to market. So not just participation on the deal, but also leadership role, so as the senior underwriter. So 3 of our top 10 senior underwriting firms are diverse-owned firms, again, not just participating, but leading transactions. So for example, Siebert Williams and Schenck led the city's first neighborhood preservation initiative borrowing, and also Philadelphia Gas Works' last new money transaction. Ramirez, which is another diverse-owned firm, led a water new money transaction 2 years ago. And Loop, which is another minority-owned firm, led the most recent neighborhood preservation initiative transaction.
Right, I heard the bell because I saw in the graph
So
it went
remember,
up and down.
I would like to do this, because y'all can follow up.
Yes.
No problem.
Did a little latitude, and so now the chair recognizes Councilmember Isaiah Thomas.
Good afternoon, Council President. A couple things real quick. Earlier, Rob, you and I were having dialogue around taxes, and clearly administration is one place. Clearly, I'm advocating for another thing. But I just want to be clear. Last year, the year before, we cut Burton wage. When we made those tax cuts, what government services suffered? Did we pick up less trash? Were there less staff members? When we look at the tax cuts that we made over the last 2 years, how did those tax cuts impact government services?
Yeah, and so as I said before, revenues still went up. So the way we look at it is that those are an investment, right? Just the way if we, invest more in public safety, that's an investment too. And it's really just a decision about what you think the best investment is to have the city grow.
Okay, and so just for the record to be clear, I know the mayor's position, right? If we were to convince the mayor somehow, some way, to possibly introduce a tax cut to bird or wage, the mayor has created a phenomenal proposal for government services that I know a lot of my district council members love. Based on some of the small cuts that we made in the past, do you anticipate us being able to lose any of those services that the mayor recommended?
So I think we'd have to look at the cuts, look at what we think the revenue impact is going to be, and look at whether that would have an impact on.
So how much has it cost us last year? Because last I checked, I remember Councilman Jay Young asked you about your 8% fund balance, right? And if you look at the 8% fund balance, if we do decide to cut taxes, the only thing that would get impacted is that fund balance, correct?
If we did cuts and didn't make any other changes, yes, what would happen is our fund balance would be
Thank you, sir. And I just want to put it on the record as well that I wholeheartedly support what the mayor is looking to do around quality of life issues, clean and green Philadelphia, public safety. I think that is the right direction to move in, and I would never recommend that we do anything to impact services that we so much know that the citizens of Philadelphia need. Second question, more of a pension question. When I first started in city council, one of the issues that I personally ran into is that the pension board made a mistake on my paycheck. It ended up costing me about $17,000. I wasn't the only person. It also cost my staff members thousands of dollars. And more important than myself and my staff, there were so many people who are part of DC 33 who lost way more than I did. They lost days that they worked, they lost overtime hours, and they did not get paid for hours that they've worked. What have we done in the last couple years to rectify the issues that we've been facing with One Philly and specifically people's payments into pensions? And how can we assure that no other city employees go through what myself or other council members had to fight against a few years ago?
And I remember that, and I know we worked closely with you and your staff members on that when that was brought to our attention. And that was a One Philly issue. And we worked closely with One Philly, with Kat and with the rest of the staff of One Philly to ensure that they were taking the correct contributions out of out of the people's pay. Shahid Lloyd from our office, one of our assistants, worked closely on that also. So we have gotten to a point where we've had one Philly tweak some of the things in the system to ensure that that doesn't happen again, and we have not had that issue whatsoever. So I would thank you for that, and again, an example of collaboration. We're the pension fund, it's people's pension contributions, although the issue was not with us, but we don't care about that. Our job is to solve problems, and we worked with you and with One Philly and whoever we had to solve that problem. It's not about casting blame, it was about solving the problem, and I appreciate, your openness to do that.
That's the best news I heard today. I am so glad, and I want to be clear and reiterate that what you're saying is factually correct. It was 100% a One Philly issue, not a pension board issue. And I do commend the pension board and everybody involved in that process to help rectify the issue really for the city workers, right? Because at the end of the day, the pension board was great for me. You'll put me on a payment plan, we'll figure it out. But those city workers who are the backbone of the city of Philadelphia, they did not deserve some of the things that were happening to them. So it's a blessing to hear that that's no longer an issue. My last question, because I can't wait to hear from the public as it relates to some of this stuff, right on cue, Council President. 2026 is right around the corner. And I know in this year's budget, we have something earmarked for a 2026 staff member. But we know that other preparations are going to be needed to assure that we're optimizing the opportunity to be on display for the world to see. What preparations have the administration made from a fiscal perspective, not events and things like that, from a fiscal perspective as it relates to anticipated revenue, and how did you equate 2026 and some of the things that we want to do around your cleaning and greening initiative, as well as around our 5-year revenue projections? And that's my last question, Council President.
Yeah, so we want to say on the preparation side, there is a working group that is working on 2026, making sure that we're prepared. So in terms of revenue, we did talk to our econometric firm. They thought, yeah, there'd be maybe a boost, but not enough, because our economy is so big, not enough to meaningfully impact what we're showing in revenues.
Just to be clear, we do anticipate a lot of tourism. We anticipate the city being on display for the world to see. But the type of revenue that we anticipate generating in hotel tax, sales tax, and other taxes won't necessarily move the needle to the point where as though that it impacts 5-year projections. Is that correct?
Yeah, and there are also some costs that will incur that we haven't shown, and so I think that'll all kind of even.
Itself.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Council President.
Thank you. Just in terms of some of the costs that we may incur, have we gotten to the point where for the FIFA World Cup that we were able to get what we're going to be on a hook on in terms of putting that cup on the world stage?
We don't have a comprehensive number. No, not yet.
Okay, all right. At some point in time,
Oh,
the
yeah.
last administration engaged with the FIFA folks, so we would need to know as we move forward how
Yes.
much it's going to cost the city of Philadelphia. So
Yep. Yes,
wanna
definitely.
Note that for the record. Councilwoman Kendra Brooks.
Thank you, Council President. All right. The administration has announced that they are taking out the largest city bond deal to date. While bonds are essential to the way in which municipalities borrow money, high interest charges and bond insurance fees, which are often higher in Black and brown cities, serve as direct payments to Wall Street. What does the bond approval process look like, and does it need to go through a referendum? And the second part is, what portion of the projected annual debt service to be paid by the city's sinking fund will go towards the interest payments alone over the next 5 years?
Yeah, so there's actually a table in the 5-year plan that breaks out between principal and interest. So we can forward that to you so you can see that division. We can forward it through the chair.
Thank you so much. That's it.
Thank you, Member Brooks. Next, I have Councilmember Nicholas O'Rourke.
Thank you, Council President. Wanted to circle back, just wrap up this one more thing. investing with, I should say, investing with our values does not include divestment. This is for the pension board. But also investment in things that we value as well. To that point, has the pension board considered programs like New York City's extremely successful economically targeted local investment program, not to give a plug to New York, but you know, where they allocate 2% of their city's pension fund to provide capital for local initiatives like building affordable housing? And hat tip to Councilwoman Ahmad, too, for kind of raising something specific to this.
Thank you for that question. We did look at New York's plan. It's different than the concept being talked about currently in Philadelphia. It's much different. We looked at CalPERS, who discontinued a similar plan. It's part of what I alluded to earlier, where a concept was presented to us. We followed up, asking for specific information, and have received none of it. So we can't work with someone on a concept. We can work with someone on a proposal. So whenever that proposal is put together, we're glad to sit down, do our due diligence, and if it passes our rigorous review like any other investment, then it could be considered to be presented to the board. And the board ultimately makes the decision on that.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Beyond that, are there any other barriers in Philadelphia taking up this, that would bar us from taking up this kind of investment option? Is there anything other than this?
I think we would have the law department, our lawyers look at it also, because there are certain boundaries, requirements, both in state law and federal law concerning the types of investments, so we would have to look at that. But what I would stress for you is what the board tries to do. They have a fiduciary duty. And the board was set up as an independent board for the exclusive benefit of the members and their beneficiaries. So the investment has to be one in which it would aid the board in ultimately paying the benefits of the members. I understand what you're saying about value, so on and so forth, and that's great. I agree with all that. But from a pension fund perspective, it is a trust. And it is a trust set up for the benefit of the members, not necessarily for other societal needs. So we have to balance that fiduciary duty. I'm not saying no. I would never say no, and that would be for the board to decide, but there is a balance there.
I appreciate the answer. This is City Treasurer and Sinking Fund. Each year, the Treasurer's Office releases the Authorized Depository Lending Study Report. One thing that the report highlights is whether the banks that the city uses are delivering on community reinvestment and also are in alignment with Philadelphia's slavery disclosure law. This law requires these banks to examine their history to see if they've profited off America's slave trade, and if they have, to offer reparative programs. I was concerned to learn that over several years, I'm a newbie here, the Treasurer's Office published reports that incorrectly cleared certain banks of their historical role in the transatlantic slave trade. When reporters asked the city about the inaccuracies, they were told that they would not receive an answer. So I'll ask, how does the Treasurer's Office cross-check the information about the slave trade given to them by banks? And why wasn't the historical record accurately represented for so many years?
Sure. Thank you, Council Member. To my knowledge, we've responded to any press inquiries related to this through the communications office, but you're correct. Since 2006, the city has commissioned an independent consultant to do an annual examination of lending practices of the city's authorized depositories relative to lending activity across the city and in peer jurisdictions. I've joined the Treasurer's Office in 2019, but I presume the review process has been similar, which is that the consultant gathers data from largely federal sources where the banks are required to remit data. And then there's a several round review process where our staff review the information provided, and we provide feedback back to the consultant before the report is released in the spring. Regarding the Wells Fargo example that you referenced, I do know that the 2017 and the 2018 studies incorrectly listed Wells Fargo as not disclosing any ties to the slavery era as required by the city code in 1400. The bank did correctly submit those disclosures to our office. So that was an error on our staff ultimately, but also with the consultant. And it's really important that we get it right. So we take ownership of that. I do know that the disclosures were correctly reported in 2019 through the current version of the study. And regardless, the bank also submitted in 17, 18, and currently disclosures regarding financial products and services as required under that code because they've disclosed those ties.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I really think that's really it. That's really it. Thank you, Council President, and thank you both for your responses.
You're welcome. The chair recognizes Councilman Jamie Gaudier.
Thank you, Mr. President. Economic opportunity for all means keeping low-income homeowners in their homes should be a top priority, because if you do not have a home, nothing else really matters. Low-income homeowners, many are seniors, are at risk of displacement, not just by rising interest rates or rent, but also by runaway property taxes imposed by the city. During the last property tax assessment, over 107,000 residential properties saw increases of at least 50%. The 3rd District saw the highest number of such increases citywide. Almost 31,000 assessments increased by at least 100%. Over 6,000 assessments increased by at least 200%, and 3,500 assessments increased by at least 300%. These are sudden increases that are too much to bear for the average Philadelphia household. I would also be remiss if I didn't acknowledge the elephant in the room. 2/3 of Philadelphia's lowest income homeowners are Black and Hispanic, meaning the current taxation and assessment system has a disproportionate impact on people of color. Even with programs like the homestead exemption or the senior tax freeze, an estimated 40,000 households are still vulnerable to tax bills they cannot afford. What is the administration doing about the homeowners that struggle to pay their tax bills and are at risk of displacement but do not qualify for the existing programs?
So we are committed to continue examining all our relief programs to make sure that they cast as wide a net as possible, and particularly committed to doing that as part of this reassessment process. So we would like to work with council on that issue.
Okay, is there a timeline for that work?
Yeah, I think it's really during this budget process.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
And has the administration studied the impact of such drastic tax increases on gentrifying neighborhoods and on the displacement of Black and brown Philadelphians? And are there plans to study the impact? We are in kind of the discussion phase about doing that, and we'll have more details on that before OPA's hearing, which is on the 16th of April. I'm sorry, before when?
Before OPA's hearing.
Oh, okay, thank you very much.
Sure.
Thank you, Council President.
Thank you. And the chair recognizes Councilmember Jeffrey J. Young.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just have a question on, I guess, OPA's timeline in correcting the tax bills, essentially, that were, I'll go through the scenario. We have a property that was purchased that was a church that now no longer qualifies for the exemption because the use is not a public use anymore. And so the property owner has been getting like estimate bills, and it's like much higher than what it should have been. And so how do we correct what that person's tax, how do we assess what that person's tax assessment should be from purchasing that church that was a prior, but now no longer has that exempt use?
Sorry, I just want to make sure I understand the question. Are you asking how the assessment is determined, or
how is it determined, and how quickly can it basically how quickly can it be changed in the system that is no longer an exempt property, right? And to provide that property owner with a more accurate tax bill, essentially.
So for the assessed value, OPA would probably have an assessment in place already because they do assess exempt properties. So when the property lost its exemption, there would be an assessment in place. It could also be, I don't know whether it's just the case that that it's a partial exemption, that, or that there's still a partial exemption, so it may not be the full, is that the issue? You know,
Yeah.
can we maybe talk offline about the
Sure.
specific case and try to figure it out?
Sure. And one more question is regarding the millage shift again. So essentially with that shift, is there or has there been an analysis on the loss of or any additional services that could be provided to the city based on that loss of revenue that from our side? I mean, essentially, like, if that's 129 million over the 5 years, what has there been any analysis on what that 129 million could have gotten us, or is there, again, with our fund balance being at 1%, at the end of that, can this additional revenue essentially could have been applied to our fund balance?
It could have. I mean, so since, as we went through our budget process, this was something fairly early we decided to do. It was something that we looked at as one of the investments that we were making. So it was really grouped with everything else. We didn't do a specific analysis of, oh, if we didn't do this investment, what else could we do? We didn't do that for each thing that we put in the plan. So to answer, the short answer to your question is no.
I mean, I think that's along the same lines of what Councilman Isaiah Thomas was asking. It's like, you know, you look at things as an investment, but like what is our return on that investment then? Right? So have you done an analysis on what the return is on that investment?
So for that, it's moving the school district towards funding adequacy, which should improve the district's outcomes.
Should.
Yeah. I mean, that's what that's about. That's what investing in education is about. Is, you know, looking at better outcomes.
Are there any I guess strings attached to that money? Is just 22 million just straight allocated to the district for them to do whatever they want with it?
So there are no specific strings, although as part of this change, we will be working really closely with them on the year-round school initiative. So it's one of the things that, you know, we'll be working with them to fund, and this money should help them do that.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. We will now, thank you, Mr. DeBoe. Any other last questions or comments before we go into public comment? Okay, thank you very much. We will now begin taking public testimony from the public on the city's proposed budget. Before proceeding, however, I will lay a few ground rules on how we will proceed with the public testimony this afternoon. We are here today to hear from you about the city's proposed operating and capital budgets and proposed tax revenue measures. To ensure that there is an opportunity for all of you to be heard, certain ground rules have been established as follows. Your testimony should be about the city's proposed operating and capital budgets and proposed revenue measures. Once your name is called, you will then have up to 3 minutes to speak. In order to be fair to all those wishing to speak, I intend to hold faithfully to the 3-minute limit. Once your allotted time has passed, you'll be asked to conclude your remarks, and I just want to say that when you hear the alarm goes off, I'm going to ask you to wrap up your remarks. We will not be giving you a 30-second warning. At this time, the chair asks for Ms. Lockhead to please call the first witness to give public testimony.
The first person to testify is Junior Brainard on bill number 240180.
Will the chair please call the next person for public testimony?
The next person to testify is Savannah Mooney on 240180.
Will the chair please call the next person for public? Oh, she's coming. 1 second, Mr. Levy.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Just state your name for the record and begin your testimony, please.
Hi, I'm Savannah Mooney.
Go ahead, Ms. Mooney.
Okay, perfect. Perfect. First, I wanted to thank you guys for opening this to public input. It's really cool to be able to come through today. I work at the Free Library as a library assistant, and it's been really great hearing everyone, bringing up city workers and our quality of life too. I really could tell who was advocating for us today. I guess I just want to speak a little bit about how firsthand the funding that goes to these public services really affects the work that we're able to do. The funding that came from the pandemic recovery federally really allowed the library to expand to hire hundreds of workers. We're open on Saturdays now, which has been huge. On a given day, I encounter hundreds of people sometimes, families that are regulars are able to meet each other. As a lot of the neighborhoods are changing, it's a really good way to create continuity between just the people that live in the area and are invested in the community. One of the things that concerns me is the cuts to the budget that are coming up, but also the Tax Reform Commission that is mostly being chosen by the Chamber of Commerce and led by Alan Dom, who ran on tax cuts. And these kinds of tax cuts are a concern for those of us that depend on funding from the city to do the work that we do. And I just wanted to, register how important that is and register how many of us there are that are invested in the work that we do every day and really care about the city and want to see all of these services succeed. And as some of that funding dries up or changes, I worry that we won't be able to achieve our mission as easily. I also wanted to register that on that Tax Reform Commission, it doesn't seem like there's maybe going to be that many people representing the people who use these services that make people excited to pay taxes in the first place, even though nobody loves paying taxes necessarily. The parks, the library, the streets, the airport, everybody that works for the city, that's the face that people are able to put on when they have to pay that tax bill every year. And I think that we should have some kind of representation or some kind of voice in how the city budget and the tax allocation situation is decided.
Thank you very much,
Yes.
and I thank you for your service. I do just want to clarify one thing for the record, just so the wrong narrative isn't out there. And based upon the city charter for the Tax Reform Commission, the chamber only gets one pick, just so you know.
Yes.
Alan Dom pick comes from the city controller.
Right.
And as the council president, I get 4 picks, the mayor get 4 picks, and each Chamber of Commerce groups gets a pick. Just for the record, so the narrative could be clear, regardless if people are for or against, they'll just know what the actual structure is. But the chamber only gets one individual allowed to participate. But we do thank you for your service and want you to continue to keep up the good work, and thank you for taking time out of your schedule and coming down here, making sure your voices and your concerns are heard.
Thank
you. You're welcome.
The next person to testify is Erica Brown on 240180. The next person to testify is Paul Levy on 240179.
Thank you very much, Council President. Thanks very much for the opportunity. Knowing I have 3 minutes, I'll talk very quickly and skip through the large deck of slides. But my bottom line message is not to give a specific proposal, but to create a context here, and I've created the slide from last year, and if I have a simple message, it's tax policy is not just about revenue generation, it's about how we create a climate that grows jobs, that creates opportunity and reduces poverty. Obviously, I'm very supportive of the mayor's commitment to clean, safe, and green. That's what the CCD has been about for 33 years, but if you jump to page 5, the point I want to simply make is that we have two interrelated, much deeper problems. One is we have the highest poverty rate of the 10 largest cities, and despite the recovery from the pandemic, we are still one of the slowest growing cities in the United States. I won't go through the history, but 100 years ago, we were a manufacturing city supported by the real estate tax. If you jump to page 8, you see as we lost manufacturing jobs, what we did as a city through the 70s and 80s is double and double again the wage tax. And as we were doing that, we steadily drove more working class and middle class people out of the city. The poverty rate clearly grows in those 50 years by 1,000 people, but we lost 500,000 working class and middle income people. Bottom of page 9, most cities have recovered their industrial jobs and have more post-industrial jobs. We are still 21% below the job levels we had in 1970, whereas Boston, New York, and Washington have more jobs. Obviously, we've enjoyed great success in Center City and University City, but jumping to the bottom of page 12, that map shows high concentration of jobs in Center City and University City, and then the absence of jobs across the rest of the city with job concentration in the suburbs. I've shared this chart at the top of the page of the top 10 employers in Philadelphia. Only 1 is taxable. They're all nonprofit. Of the top 20, only 4. And at the bottom of page 13, we have a very low density of businesses in the city and an even lower density of black and brown businesses. A point I think will be of interest to every district council person at the top of page 14 is 42% on average of every one of your constituents is reverse commuting today to jobs in the suburbs. They are working in the city and paying a wage tax of now 3.7. All they have to do is move to the suburbs and they get a 2.5% raise to be closer to their jobs. So I have data in here on wage and business taxes. I'll just end on page 18. The absence of jobs means we have a very low real estate tax base. If you can see at the top of page 18, the substantially higher base in Lower Merion, we're below the statewide average, and it is our current tax structure that we've built up over the last 50 years that puts us as non-competitive. I would end simply with this statement: don't frame this discussion as what businesses want versus what services residents need. It's how we create a climate to reduce poverty, to grow jobs, to create opportunity in the city. So thank you very much for the opportunity, and sorry to rush through this so quickly.
No, it's all right, and I know you were here when I hosted the hearing on how do we look at making Philadelphia become a more competitive environment. I'm a strong advocate around focusing on job growth and development as a means of addressing poverty, because when we talk about a lot of key issues regarding revenues, our rental assistance, rental aversion program, where we're talking about putting cash in people's hands directly, right? Hopefully we get to an environment where we have enough job growth and development, where a lot of those programs we depend less on, because we're making people go from poverty to, I don't only want to call it the middle class, but you're building generational wealth as opposed to individual having to depend on a variety of different government-dependent services based upon us not just growing our economy and, most importantly, opportunities for people to have a pathway out of poverty. But during that hearing, you mentioned something that was something that I've been thinking about for a while, and it came from Councilman Jamie Carter here, and you talked about, in the event if there was a net and wage tax reduction, how do you tie it to not only the largest major businesses, but supporting the small black and brown businesses? And you actually said there was a way at the last hearing, but I didn't get a chance to follow up with you on ideas around how do you still connect that to?
Sure. Well, I guess 2 points. One, I skipped over on page 21 a slide I think that's incredibly important if you look at the bottom of the page, that 73% of all adults living above the poverty level have a job. poverty is concentrated not among the working poor, but the people without jobs. So we need services, we need to help in education and job training, but jobs are the huge number of solution. I think one, clearly for small businesses, I can speak directly about large businesses. The business income and receipts tax is a major barrier, but it is also a major barrier for smaller businesses. That is, it's a tax that does not exist within the suburbs, so I clearly urge you to look at reducing that. But then, if I understood your question, there are major opportunities. Our CCD as an employer clearly can contract with local businesses and does do that. Clearly, major firms can contract with emerging firms in the city, if that is going to the question you're asking. But to me, a larger, more competitive context, getting jobs for people and then delivering services to help people be prepared for those jobs would be my formula.
When you talk about procurement services and professional services opportunities,
right.
Talk about, there's this notion that when you do wage and net tax reduction, some call it trickle down, the trickle down theory. What's your response to that?
I mean, again, if I lived in West Oak Lane and Mount Airy and I'm working in the suburbs and I'm paying a 3.7% wage tax to the city of Philadelphia, all I have to do is move across the county line closer to my job. That's not trickle down. That's putting more money directly in your pocket. So, look, I want to be very clear, as I said at the last hearing, the CCD was a taxing authority. I believe that you need to assess businesses' property in order to deliver services. That's absolutely fundamental. My point here is the mix of taxes that we have chosen, and that first chart from last year's budget shows it. 42% of those are wage tax, 20% are BERT. Most cities are much more reliant on the real estate tax. So we need to shift. Slowly, it can't be done overnight, but we need to shift. Lowering wage and business taxes should generate more property tax, which is how we supported government before.
Councilmember Jamie Gaudier.
Thank you, Council President. With all due respect, I just wanted to point out that the question was not answered. I mean,
maybe I didn't hear it, so I apologize if I didn't completely hear it. So please restate it if I didn't.
The Council President asked, as we're considering tax cuts, which we have for the past several years, how do we make sure that the Black and brown businesses that we often put in the front of this fight, every time we have this debate, it's about helping Black and brown businesses. But from a pure numbers perspective, by and large, because of just the sheer breakdown of who has businesses and how much they make and who's paying the BERT, it's not Black and brown businesses who share the lion's share of the impact and the benefit. But if that's why we're doing this, then we should come up with a direct way in these conversations to make sure that the businesses that are in the front of this debate every year are the ones that are going to see a large share of the benefit. And a lot of things can happen. Majority businesses can contract with minority businesses. You know, businesses can come here and that'll be more opportunity for all. A lot of things can happen. But what are we doing to make sure that what we're saying is our goal is going to happen? And that's a part of the question that I hope that the Tax Commission can answer. I do support the goal of having job growth. I do support the goal of helping Black and brown businesses and small businesses. Those are good things for the city. But what becomes troublesome to me is that the means by which we discuss doing that, by and large, the benefit from what we're doing doesn't go to the people that we say that we want to help the most. So in this conversation, can there be a more direct way that we're talking about providing the benefit or the lion's share of the benefit to the Black and brown businesses that are always put at the front of this debate on a consistent basis every year?
So if that was directed to me as a question, let me try to answer it. I apologize if I didn't answer. If I could direct you to page 13, the chart that's at the bottom there. On the left side on that chart, this is the number of businesses of all kinds per 1,000 residents. And what you see here is this is comparing a series of cities to their suburbs. And Philadelphia has an incredibly low density, page 13, I'm sorry, the bottom slide. Philadelphia, among the cities we compared it to, New York, Boston, Atlanta, and Washington, in general, has a much lower number of businesses of all kinds per 1,000 residents. The chart on the right focuses particularly on black and brown businesses. What you see is really a disturbing disparity in all cities. All right, there is no denying the disparity, but notice the disparity is even worse in Philadelphia. That is the relationship between a diminished number of large businesses or businesses of all kinds and minority businesses. So my answer to you is, yes, you definitely need to make sure that we prioritize small and black and brown businesses, but it is not, in my judgment, an either or choice. That is, if we can't grow big businesses, the office building across the street is contracting with janitorial firms, elevator firms, food services firms. They go hand in hand. So I don't argue with prioritizing smaller minority businesses. My point is we have a problem across the board for large businesses, white businesses, Hispanic businesses, Asian businesses, and black businesses. And part of that is related to a non-competitive tax structure. That's my basic point.
Councilmember Thomas.
Thank you, Council President. Quick question. Ironically enough, it's a big event that happens in Conshohocken every year called the Donofrio Classic, big basketball event. It's a big basketball event that happens every year in Conshohocken called the Donofrio Classic, and because of the hat that I wear in the sports world, I spend a lot of time outside of Philadelphia, Conshohocken, Plymouth Meeting, Jersey, Derby. Basketball takes me everywhere. One of the things I noticed, and I even cited in an article, and I referenced it earlier today, was that there was an article that was written recently on a big tech company that chose to be in Conshohocken instead of Philadelphia. In the midst of your PowerPoint, you talk about the suburbs of Philadelphia. Can you help us understand how our tech structure impacts the success of the suburbs of Philadelphia? And also, can you help us understand our suburbs compared to other major cities across the country? Does Houston suburbs do this well? Does New York suburbs do this well? Does other large cities have suburbs whose business growth and job growth are doing that much better than the city? So can you help us with those two things?
Sure. Look, we clearly have had a national historic problem with redlining of cities, with underperformance of city economies versus their suburbs. There are disparities that you see here across the board. If you look at the bottom of page 12, that to me, that's the map of density of jobs in the region, right? That tells you a huge story. We have a successful center city and university city, and an absence of jobs many other places in the city in all of your council districts. And then the specific answer to your question, I think you can find on the top of page 17, which is this is data that we did about 5 years ago, but I don't think it has substantially changed. This is comparing, let's say, that tech firm you mentioned. The average rent at the time we did this in the downtown was $32.65 a square foot. The average rent in the suburbs was slightly cheaper, $29.82 a square foot. But then our real estate taxes were roughly comparable, but then on top of that, $2.78 a square foot in use and occupancy, all right? We had $16.98 a square foot in BERT. And then we have the wage tax in here because this was designed for, imagine you're a suburban firm and we want that suburban firm to move into the city. They're going to have to make up the wage tax differential for suburban residents who live in the suburbs who now come in and work in the city. The point of this simply is that occupancy in Center City in this graphic doubled the cost for an office firm. So if you asked in a purely business sense, does this make economic sense to lease in Center City? The answer was no. And that was the tax base the CCD relied on too. So this is a huge issue here. This same issue plays out for small businesses. We have not done the analysis. I believe the minority chambers are working on that analysis, but we need to do the same analysis for small businesses, to take a small business in any of your districts and say, what are the costs of being in the city, and then move them out of the city, and what are those costs? Again, I want to be clear. You need to raise taxes to deliver services and to support the schools. I was in that same business. All I'm saying is the mix we have chosen is counterproductive, and not tomorrow, but as a strategy, we need to lower the dependence on wage and BERT and rely more, as we did historically, on real estate.
So just to paraphrase before I close out, the business choosing to go into the suburbs probably saves half of their private margin by choosing to go into the suburbs instead of being in the city of Philadelphia? Is that what you're telling us?
Yeah, I mean, we have a tax structure which makes it, there's lots of good reasons to be in the city. Amenities, the transit system, access to labor. I don't want to minimize the strengths of the city, but from a purely cost point of view, we make it much more expensive to be here than in the suburbs.
And I just want to remind everybody that the pandemic showed us how to work from anywhere, right? So a person doesn't necessarily have to come into the office or things like that. The pandemic has showed us that jobs and wages can move easily. And if we're going to be competitive in attracting those folks, we have to do something different to put us in a position so that somebody doesn't choose to relocate in Conshohocken, but still enjoy all the culture and the fun side of the city of Philadelphia.
I'm very pleased that the mayor is very much talking about getting city workers back, getting private sector workers back. The more workers we have back, the more we can get that effect of contracting in small business. But if you're an office firm who has a suburban branch, and you have suburban residents, they can go work in the suburban office today and avoid the city's wage tax. So we're creating incentives for people not to come back.
Thank you, Council President.
The chair recognizes Councilmember Jeffrey Young.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Levy, you alluded to the other reasons why those businesses would come or choose to be in the city or not, other than the pure economics of it all. As the person who ran CCD, can you tell us what some of those other things are that where a business would choose Philadelphia despite the economics? And are there investments we can make in those areas to attract businesses as well?
Sure, and let me turn that question on its head again, and why I'm very supportive of the mayor's lead with clean, safe, and green. Is if we can't achieve that in any neighborhood or the downtown, we're not going to have business growth or residential growth. So that is really key. Clearly, pre-pandemic, being at the center of our transit system gave employers access to a 360-degree labor market that didn't need to rely on cars. That was a huge advantage. Being near arts and entertainment and restaurants, a huge advantage. Being near the sports facilities, et cetera, was a huge advantage. So I don't want to talk about taxes as a way to badmouth the city. I'm obviously a very big promoter of the city, and we had competitive advantages. We all know we've been through a major crisis here. All cities have. And the challenges we had are exacerbated now. Obviously, the perception of safety is an issue that you have taken on and need to address. And the ability of people to work remotely, as Councilman Thomas just asked me about, is also a factor. So what I'm saying is we need to deal with the basics of clean, safe, and green, but the more competitive a tax structure, the more we attract both large employers and grow small employers.
In your role as CCD, have you seen the issue with our school district as being a hindrance to businesses located in the city?
Clearly, access to skilled labor is essential, all right? And so clearly one of the big reasons why I believe we need to grow the real estate tax base is we need more reliable funding for our school districts. So the simple answer to your question is yes, having an educated population in the city helps us attract people, but in a regional economy, they can also draw people from outside the city. Where we were pre-pandemic is 52% of all jobs in Center City were held by Philadelphia residents. A third of them required no more than a high school diploma. A third required an associate degree. So we were doing a decent job. But yes, we need to fund schools well. Again, I'm not a person who's saying tax policy is the solution to everything or the problem with everything. Good funding of schools is absolutely essential.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. The chair recognizes Councilmember Cindy Bass.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
So just a couple of questions for you. Back to page 17, and just looking at the cost for office space.
Right.
And, Philadelphia and the suburbs, there's really only a couple of bucks between them until you add on all the additional cuts. And so, and then the cost, as you said, doubles. And I actually agree with you that, we need to look at some cuts to our tax structure because, we're just not competitive.
Right.
We're just really not competitive. But, like during the conversation today, there was conversation around when you reduce the amount of revenue, you have to also correspondingly reduce the amount of services, particularly social services that you're providing, which, as you mentioned, Philadelphia is a city with a very, high amount of folks who are living in poverty and who have substantial need. So what do you say as a remedy to that, knowing that, one, we need to reduce taxes to get folks in the door, and at the same time, we need that tax revenue to support folks in Philadelphia who, we are the last line of defense. We are the support system. So how do we balance those two things?
Yeah, and that is the hardest job, and I don't want to make it simpler in any way. But if you look at page 20, I think in that period of time that we looked at here, which was from the recovery from the recession 2011, we did this data up through 2017. This was a period in which this council and prior administrations steadily lowered wage and business taxes. We saw job growth, and the number of people in poverty dropped by a significant number. All right. So obviously, a growing economy can create new jobs, and we need to have that balance of reducing wage and business taxes enough to still fund the services you need, but knowing that your goal here is also to create a more competitive business environment so the base grows. We've done that before. From the late 90s through the last decade, we had steady wage and business tax reduction. The city actually generated surpluses and we had growth. Now, there are big downturns that are beyond all of our control, but we've done this before. And the other formula, which is the formula of the 70s and 80s of just steadily raising taxes, just drove the working class, it drove the middle class out. So again, there's not a snap your fingers solution here. It's a very delicate balancing act. I'm not here to say this is what the particular formula should be. I'm just urging this broader context. It's not business versus services. It's growth to provide opportunity.
Got it. Thank you. The other question I had for you quickly is just going to, I think my time was, okay. Page 13, and just looking at the number of private employers here in the city that are not real estate exempt and the ones that are. And as I looked through the list, one of the things that came to mind is pilots, payments in lieu of taxes. Okay. And so, Rendell had success with pilots. I think that he was the one who sort of originated the concept and, was able to, through his relationships, was able to capitalize on that. So pilots actually happened. And I don't know that pilots have ever happened since then. I don't know that there's been any significant pilots that have been applied to help the bottom line here in the city of Philadelphia. From any of these pretty large institutions that we really do support in so many different ways. And so my question to you is, how do we get pilots that actually work? Do you have a thought on that? Have you, done any work on that, especially when you look at the top 50 employers and the fact that most of these folks aren't taxpayers.
I want to answer this very carefully because I clearly...
Uh-oh.
No. I mean, look, at the CCD, all of these institutions were tax exempt, okay? So I had that experience too. We would negotiate with some and get contributions. So I believe in doing that, okay? But my broader point here is I don't consider the chart of the 50 largest employers or the 10 largest employers in the city of Philadelphia a definition of success. That we are so dependent on nonprofit and exempt institutions is a problem. Most cities have far more private sector, fully tax-paying firms, as do our suburbs today. And so, yes, if there's a direct service that somebody should be paying for, I'm not against that, and I negotiated those at the CCD. My point is this should be a warning sign to us that we have driven a lot of businesses out to the suburbs. And we need to find that balancing act, okay?
I would agree, it's a warning sign, but I, just looked at it a little bit differently of, most of these institutions aren't going anywhere, and we don't want them to go anywhere. Like these are, staples in our economy. We don't want them to leave, even, with being tax exempt, there still are contributions that are received. Just in sort of, like supporting restaurants and, retailers and just, like across the board, bringing people in and, moving folks into Philadelphia. So, we don't want them to go, and we do want to add to the mix, but, in my opinion, they need to contribute. They need to contribute, so. So I think that's a discussion that, we can continue to have.
Yeah, I just urge you to look at this list, and I can get you the list for New York, for Chicago, and you'll see how many more private sector firms there are in their top employers.
Okay.
That's my only point. I mean, I tried to negotiate contributions from exempt at the CCD. I fully get what you're saying. But I'm also conscious that the more small businesses that pay taxes, the more big businesses that pay taxes, the better it is for all of us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Chair recognizes Councilmember Nina Mai. Public comment that went to a hearing.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. Good afternoon, Paul. How are you? I was going to ask this question too about the pilots, but my thought on that was maybe there's a graduated, timed reduction in how we apply our pilots as commensurate with what we get in as other revenue sources, to actually show them a plan that you help us as well get these other big businesses here. Everybody work together so we can then graduate you down and we can, fill the revenue source. So that's one, is to think of a really practical plan of how we do this. Because you mentioned Chicago. Chicago has a lot of the same issues on the problem side as we do, and yet they're able to bring in businesses, right? So we need to kind of explore that. Another question I had is, what is the burden, if there is such, between Philadelphia being a county and a city of the first class?
We obviously have to pay for some things that other cities obviously have a surrounding county to support, but I mean, I'm not proposing we do something different here in any way.
Just to place us in the space that Allegheny and, Pittsburgh.
Sure, Pittsburgh benefits from its surround, absolutely.
Analogous to us in that sense,
Right.
So anyway, I'm sorry, go ahead, answer. You're going to answer about how to attract.
Unless you're asking me to advocate for either annexing or giving away part of the city,
No,
sure.
I'm not. The first question is, what is a plan do you think is reasonable to ask for our pilots to operate while we're in this grant, especially as you see our fund balance looking so dire? We need to do something, and we need our, as I call them, corporate nonprofits, to really understand what the issue is.
Again, I want to tread very carefully here because let me just put it this way. An accounting firm, a real estate firm, an engineering firm has offices in the city and in the suburbs. And we know right now that there are suburban residents who are working in the suburban offices and not needing to pay the Philadelphia wage tax. Lots of universities can open campuses elsewhere in the region as well. Obviously, we really benefit from a Penn, a Drexel, a Temple University. But, you know, there's a Temple Ambler campus, et cetera. So just, all I'm saying is tread carefully there, right? They have options in the region too.
Warning well taken.
Right.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Thank you very much for
Thank you,
your
I appreciate
public
the
comment.
opportunity. Thank you.
Will the clerk please call, well, Ms. Longhead, will you please call the next individual for public comment?
The next person to testify is Will Carter.
He's not here. The next person?
The next person to testify is Erica Brown.
And Erica Brown, and it's two people. Who's the other gentleman? Erica, how you doing? And also, your names?
Junior Brainerd.
Okay. Thank you, Junior. We called you earlier. How are you? Just go ahead and begin your testimony, and welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, my name is Erica Brown. I use she, her, and I'm going to turn 21 in a month. Really excited. And I graduated from Masterman High School in 2021. And in 10th grade, I had English class in room 101 with Miss Weber every Friday. And I joined the Sunrise Movement in 11th grade, and we used that same room for our meetings, and we'd get together and plan, how are we going to go to the lunchroom? How are we going to go put flyers on the lockers to get people to walk out and come to City Hall to show you all that we need climate action now. But a couple months later, after the first walkout, room 101 got closed off. We didn't know why, and we heard all these banging and all these workers started coming in, and it turned out that that room was full of asbestos. And you know, I don't want to, in 30 years, find something in my body, have to go to a doctor and find out I have cancer, right? And so what I'm here to talk about today is how can we make sure that our schools are actually funded, actually get the repairs they need? Because when I was in high school, I didn't really understand what city council was about. I didn't understand how it impacted my life until moments like those. And when we're talking about the suburbs, right? COVID happens, Lower Merion gets this complete air filter renewal, we get hand sanitizer stapled to the walls, right? Right. So that's what I'm here to talk about, and I'm very appreciative that the mayor and this council has not yet introduced tax cuts, giving back money to the rich so that we can make sure everyone pays their fair share, because people will say Lower Merion, they have just more wealth, and that's true, but in this city we have wealth too. We got 2 Comcast centers, we got sports arenas, right? We've got millionaires and billionaires that pass through here all the time. And so I also want to say that an issue that's very important to me and other young people like me in the city is gun violence, and how the Sunrise Movement and people in my community, people I've talked to, see the solution is funding rec centers and libraries, safe spaces that young people can go to at any time of the day, making sure that they're open on weeknights and weekends. And we need funding to make that happen. And we want to make sure that everyone pays their fair share in the city to make that happen so that we can have safe streets and young people can have bright futures, and they can have pathways to working at rec centers and libraries, pathways to green jobs, making sure there's solar panels and geothermal as well so we can all live safely.
Thank you very much. Junior, just state your name for the record and please begin your public testimony.
Good afternoon. My name is Junior Brainerd, and I'm a faculty member at Community College of Philadelphia, as well as co-president of our local union, AFT 2026, which represents 1,200 faculty and staff. I'm here today to talk about the importance of the city in investing in public education, including the operating budget of Community College of Philadelphia. What we want for ourselves is what we want for our students: dignity, respect, and wages that allow families to thrive. For far too long, the chronic underfunding of CCP has been paid for on the backs of workers and students. In the last 20 years, the city has shifted over $325 million in operating costs onto students. We are the city's college, serving a working class student population that is 70% women and 73% students of color. The city has repeatedly fallen short of its commitments to fund a third of the college's operating costs. Because the city doesn't pay, Black and brown CCP students are taking more than $20 million in student loans annually and getting less support as the college remains chronically understaffed with wages and benefits that don't keep up with inflation. A $20 million annual increase in funding for the operating budget of CCP would shift the cost burden away from student debt and allow for the hiring and retention of faculty and staff. We know the wealth to fund CCP exists. We need elected officials to choose to invest in the common good of all Philadelphians. When we don't tax the rich, our communities are forced to foot the bill and are left with widening racial wealth gaps. And when there are tax cuts proposed, we need to say no. We don't need tax cuts that only benefit big business. Instead, we need to tax the rich to generate the revenue the city needs to fund institutions like CCP. We need $20 million more so that we can have a fully funded college that allows CCP to pave the path for students. We need $20 million more in operating because our students want to be able to show up to learn, but this is challenging when their immediate needs for adequate food, transportation, and childcare access on campus are not met. We also need to make CCP a place that can recruit and retain the talented and diverse faculty and staff our students need. Over half of staff at CCP do not make a living wage, which means most of our staff and many of our faculty work second and third jobs to make ends meet or leave the college for better jobs. And we need smaller class sizes, smaller caseloads, and full staffing so that students get the support and learning conditions they need to graduate and move into their jobs in Philadelphia. Each semester, I see students who put in a great effort and sacrifice to pursue their education. They work full-time, they figure out how to compose essays on their smartphones, they do their best with the limited number of sessions they're allowed to meet with a tutor in the learning lab, and wait in long lines to see a counselor during crisis. It's time for the city of Philadelphia to match the effort that our students, faculty, and staff put in each day and fully fund our operating budget.
Thank you.
The next person to testify is
Thank you very
Jennifer
much.
Rodriguez. The next person to testify is Symbol Lai.
Hello, can you hear me? Okay, I will get started. Good afternoon, my name is Symbol Lai. I'm here representing Children First. I live in West Oak Lane. Yes. Council members Thomas, Ahmad, Young, thank you so much today for raising questions about the school funding and thinking about economic development through the lens of education. So I'm here today to testify on Bill 240180, the ordinance to increase the share of property taxes going to the School District of Philadelphia from 55% to 56%. While we applaud Mayor Parker's initiative to increase city investment in our schools, I want to encourage members of council that we must be more aggressive. We need to increase the share of property taxes going to schools from 55% to 58%. So last week, Children First, we were all at City Hall with about 45 parents, meeting with every member of City Council to share statistics about how kids across Philadelphia were doing and in specific districts. So I want to share and remind folks some of the citywide statistics today. Across the city, 34% of students are passing the English Language Arts PSSA, 19% of students are passing the Math PSSA, 36% of students have a stellar school attendance of over 95%, just 36%. And meanwhile, there are 291 teacher and support staff vacancies in this school district. So these numbers should really kind of hit you in the gut because they're not very good, right? So this is what happens after years of chronic underfunding. And this is the hole that we currently have to dig ourselves out of as a city of Philadelphia. And this is why we can't have an investment in the school district that only brings about the status quo, because if it's only the status quo, those numbers aren't going to budge. So we need a budget that brings in recurring new local revenue every year so that our school district can actually grow and improve. So that means we need new revenue to hire teachers, we need new revenue to hire social workers, we need new revenue to hire librarians, we need new revenue for schools to have libraries, period. A lot of schools don't have books in their schools for kids to read. So I know everyone here is invested in the economic development of Philadelphia. You know, how are we gonna grow the city? These questions have come up perpetually today. That's what today is about, right? How are we gonna grow Philadelphia as a city so that we're no longer the largest poor city in America? How are we gonna stem population loss so that we can have a firm and growing tax base? How are we going to get people to stay? And the answer to that is we need to fix our school system and we need to fund our schools. When families see that their kids have a good education, they can get a good education in the city no matter where they live. They don't have to spend half their time trying to figure out what catchment they're gonna live in, buying specific neighborhoods, free up all that energy. They're gonna stay in Philadelphia. And I know this because I have a bunch of friends that do that, right? They spend so much time trying to figure out where they're gonna have kids, send their kids, that they end up just leaving for the suburbs. And so, council members, I'm here to say that it's time to turn a new leaf this budget cycle, and we need to make a school budget that is not the status quo. Please increase the share of property taxes going to school from 56% to 58%. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I just want to put one thing on the record as we examine how we support our school district. And I'm very familiar with Donna Cooper and Children's First. Just as we move forward, just evaluating how the district work toward getting us a return on our investment, right? Making sure that funding is actually going to investing in the children, not top heavy on salary. We still have a 50% dropout rate. We still struggle in a variety of different areas when it comes to reading and math, right? But yet, as a council body, and even when I served as a state representative, either it was a cigarette tax or when I arrived down in city council was a sales tax, right? And we even created a commission for oversight, and where the chairperson of education meets with the district every single month just to evaluate how we support our students, get to the point where their return on an investment from dollars and cents as we support the whole student, the outcomes see us going up in terms of reading, math, graduation rate. And so, but I appreciate the great work that Children's First is doing, and this is a part of us looking at how we invest in terms of dollars and cents of our young people.
Council President, we would love to work with you to make sure that all the money that's given is invested in kids to turn outcomes up. We advocate for kids, so at the end of the day, we want kids to do well.
Absolutely. Thank you, and keep up the good work, too.
The next person to testify is Will Carter.
Let me first apologize for my tardiness. Council starts on time now, and so do the budget hearings. Thank you for having me, council members and Councilmember Johnson. William Carter, I'm Vice President of Local Government Affairs at the Chamber of Commerce for Greater Philadelphia and a founding member of the Inclusive Growth Coalition. Once again, thank you for allowing me to testify today. As we all know, our city experiences historical poverty, education shortfalls, blight, gun violence, and global economic forces that make it increasingly difficult for people to make ends meet. All are very complex issues with proposed solutions from across the ideological spectrum. However, it does seem that everyone from heads of households to heads of companies agree that increasing the number of people making a good living helps with each. If Philadelphia is to realize true inclusive growth and change its designation as the largest poor city in America, we must have the forethought and fortitude to reverse our decades-long declining job and business viability. Many of you all have met with us and have seen the data that shows that Philadelphia jobs have decreased 23% since 1970, while regional competitors like New York, Boston, and Washington, D.C. Have seen double-digit increases over the same period. This is not an either-or moment. The city can maintain services and invest in inclusive job and business growth. We can provide quality services and do the same. As a matter of fact, I think it's the most prudent thing to do is to be able to provide quality services and invest in our future. To reverse course, Philadelphia must do two critical things. One, increase the number of good-paying jobs and business opportunities in Philadelphia, and two, increase the number of people prepared to take advantage of such opportunities. Under number one, increasing good-paying opportunities, the fact is Philadelphia has fewer private employers of all demographics than our comparable locales, and very few for-profit companies at the top of the city's largest employer list. Such low business density correlates with fewer business startups, lower economic input, and higher poverty within areas. So it stands to reason that Philadelphia must grow and attract more private employers to create jobs. However, as you all know, currently too many businesses are dissuaded from locating here due to, among other things, due to the high cost of doing business. Employers often cite the highest in the nation wage tax and the double tax from the BERT as major factors. As a point of fact, 80% of respondents to a joint survey performed by the Philadelphia's diverse chambers of commerce indicated that reducing taxes on business is a primary action the city could enact to help them stay, grow, and hire here. This is because entrepreneurs of all demographics need as much certainty as possible for confident business ownership and clearer forecasting. Small, diverse businesses pursuing financing are in situations, it's a 2-minute thing, that's right. Small, diverse businesses pursuing financing are in situations where their cost inputs are relatively unpredictable, as inflation and other variables may change from one year to the next. Therefore, it's easy to understand why a city that invests in them with a long-term schedule of tax reduction provides more certainty and more confidence for them as the money that they can count on as they start expanding higher locally. So obviously, these businesses would love the city of Philadelphia to invest in them. They want to stay growing higher here. I will, because of the time, go to the second part, which is we need people to be prepared to take advantage of these opportunities. On a parallel track, Philadelphia must also activate the talent that is abundant in our city, upskill people for the jobs of today and tomorrow, regardless of whether they have a college degree. To effectively do so, it takes stakeholders from across the city to intentionally collaborate. There are many examples of this happening throughout the city. I think what needs to be effectively done by the city is to help invest in the best practices that help upskill people for the jobs of the day. This effective workforce development requires a commitment from all stakeholders, including public and private and nonprofit sectors, to a career pathway system that supports ongoing progression for job seekers and incumbent workers. Finally, just to close out, the time is now to accomplish these two goals. Many of you all know I worked in these chambers for 16 years. I've worked for the Chamber of Commerce for 5 years. I've seen both sides of the coin. I know that now is a great opportunity for us to work together to make this happen. I'm not trying to say it's going to be easy, but I know that we have to work together in order for us to be successful in moving this city forward and making sure that more people are working in good paying jobs and more of our businesses are successful. The city does have the revenue and growth projections to realize this. With adequate investment in growing and attracting employers and building trained workforce, the city of Philadelphia will realize more jobs, more business-to-business commerce, more foot traffic on our commercial corridors, and more overall dollars flowing throughout Philadelphia. We will also boast an increased tax base for public services, leading to less blight, less violence, less crime, and less poverty. It's time to get our city, I say this all the time, it's time to get our city popping again. That's a macroeconomic term. That means energy-fueled growth. And if we can get our city popping again and have people stop talking about going to New York and to D.C. for a popping city, we can make this happen now, and I know this council is prepared to take it to that level, and the time is now. So we look forward to working with you all towards this end.
Thank you. And I just want to say, for the record, right, I don't know if popping is a macroeconomic term. That's a hood term, but we understand exactly what you're saying. As we wrap up, any other questions or comments from members of the committee? Thank you for taking time out of your schedule here for public testimony today. The chair recognizes Councilmember Catherine Gilmore Richards for a motion that the public hearing and meeting on the bills and resolutions before the committee today stand in recess until Tuesday, April the 2nd of 2024 at 10 a.m.
Thank you, Council President. I move that the Committee of the Whole stand in recess until Tuesday, April 2nd at 10 a.m.
It has been moved and properly seconded that the public hearing and meeting on the bills and resolutions before the committee today stand in recess until Tuesday, April the 2nd, 2024 at 10 a.m. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, the ayes have it, and the motion carries. We will see everyone on April the 2nd, 2024 at 10 a.m. Good job, everyone.